Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Lewis. I'm the Policy Director here at the Eno Center for Transportation. Welcome to the third day of our symposium where we're looking at transit costs and project delivery. And this session and this day, we're really kind of looking at best practices. And one of the really crucial parts of our research was looking at other countries. And so we thought it would be helpful to bring some of the experts that we talked to as part of our research and have a conversation with them about their own frameworks for success and the best practices that they have uncovered in their careers, in their organizations, and the projects that they've worked on. So we're going to have a conversation here over the next hour or so about some of those practices. We want to talk about project governance. We want to talk about staffing, permits, the private sector. We're going to look at standards for design and ultimately how we apply all of this information back to projects here in the United States. And so we have three distinguished panelists with us, and we thank them very much for their time and dialing in from across the pond. We have first Anngreth Foss, who is the director of Copenhagen Metro. Welcome, Anngreth. We have Neil Jules Sorensen, who is the global architecture leader at Arup. And finally, we have Dionisio Gonzalez, who is a senior advisor at UITP and has worked at multiple projects in Madrid and around the world. So thanks again for the panelists and your participation and dialing into this session today. We're going to start by just letting the panelists self-introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their current roles and their past experience in project delivery, so we have a better sense of where they're coming from and what some of their roles and experiences mean for the discussion we're going to have. So just 1 or 2 minutes. We'll start with you, Anngreth, and then we'll go to Neil and then Dionisio, and just again 1 or 2 minutes about your background and current roles.
Yes, thank you. I have been in this construction company in 28 years. I was the first employee, and the first CEO. Now I'm a director, and what we have accomplished is actually establishing a metro open for passengers in 2002 and 2007, 2019 and 2020, and we are now working on an extension which will open in 2024 and preparing for a new line. What is actually important for where I come from is that this company is public owned but private managed company. The company is based, and the project is based on a law which has passed the Danish Parliament. The funding of the project, which is metro lines, is actually made by the higher value of the land around the infrastructure and the surplus from the operation. So there's no public money in the project. I think that might be the first important issues about me and my background.
That's great. Thank you. Neil.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Neil Jules Sorensen, and I'm an architect, educated in Denmark. Did a lot of normal architecture until I started working for Anna Grete on the Copenhagen Metro 25 years ago. And since that, I've been involved in metro stations, railway stations, whatever is on wheels, and in all parts of the world. So I moved from Copenhagen after the first part of the metro to London, and then back again to Copenhagen to do the city ring, and then back to London again. And then I had 3 years in North America, in Toronto, to work with Metrolinx, to work with light rail, but also to work with the the more heavy rail and commuter rail in and around Toronto, but also looking at the US market for Arup, where I am the global architectural leader and heavily involved in all our bits around the world. So I also worked in Singapore and other places in Asia. So I think what I learned about all these things is that we have a lot of rules in rail, and we maybe have, it's a very conservative thing to do rail. It's not a revolution, it's an evolution, and you have to remember that. I also think there's changes coming, and I think that some organizations are faster in moving with the changes that is coming that can help them. And I'm thinking about the whole digital overlay. But when it all comes down to something, it's all about how do you feel as a passenger, and how do these stations belong? So for quite some time, stations didn't belong at all. And we lost that, so I think sort of in the 50s or 60s, and now they belong again. And I think, Copenhagen is a good example of, city ring, and that all the stations belongs, but also the stations we're doing, different parts of the world now, it's all about how do you belong, and how do you actually make it safe for passengers, but also that what I realized was that we actually are emotionally in touch with our station. So when I meet someone from London and I ask, where do you live? They say a funny name on the street. And I say, where's that? They say, oh, it's near Angel Station. Then I know where that is. So people are connecting with a station in a way that when I started designing stations, I didn't get it. And over the years, I think it's so important. How do we actually connect to the station, not just to the platform, but actually also to the station area? How do I get to the station, the last mile and all of these things? So I'll stop for now until we get into the further. So, but I have a background of, the most foresighted companies to the very, very conservative companies working, the whole range of rail structure.
That's great. Yep, lots of questions that we'll be asking about stations and those things here in the next little bit. But let's go to Dionisio for a few minutes.
Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me being here with all of you. I'm a civil engineer by background. I've been working in transport and urban mobility for 20 years. And I have had the opportunity to work at Madrid Public Transport Authority, starting there my career in 1999 as engineer in the Studies and Planning Department. In 2005 and 2006, I had also the opportunity to join the European Investment Bank in Luxembourg, where I took part in the appraisal of different metro extension projects, railway projects around Europe. Then I came back to Consorcio de Transportes de Madrid, the Public Transport Authority in Madrid, as head of PPPs. And finally, since 2011, I have been working there in Madrid as Director of Strategic Planning and Operations until 2017, when I joined UITP, which is the International Association of Public Transport. To give you some context, Madrid is the capital city of Spain with 3 million inhabitants. The Public Transport Authority there covers the planning and management of infrastructures and services in the whole region. That means 6.5 million inhabitants, 179 municipalities with 179 mayors, and I think we will be discussing about that also. All in all, it's an integrated public transport system with the subway, with suburban trains, buses, metropolitan buses, light rail, all in all 1.5 billion passengers per year, and an annual budget of only for operations of 2.2 billion euros. During this period, I had the chance to work at Consorcio, at the Public Transport Authority in Madrid. There were impressive extension plans for the metro. Just to give you some figures, between 1995 and 1999, 56 kilometers and 38 stations. Between 1999 and 2003, 55 kilometers and 36 stations. And between 2003 and 2007, 92 kilometers and 101 stations. So the metro that was limited to Madrid before 1999 is reaching now 12 municipalities in the metropolitan area with 300 kilometers and more than 300 stations. So this impressive extension plan, combined with a number of investments fostering, of course, intermodality has contributed to a very positive change in quality of life, as Neil was mentioning, due to the economic, social, and environmental benefits of public transport.
Excellent. And so, as we heard, there's going to be a focus today in our conversation about the metro system in Madrid and the metro system in Copenhagen, because that's where our panelists have a lot of experience, but they've also dabbled in this all over the world. But we do want to talk about those two examples. In our research, we found that they were pretty compelling in terms of their costs, right? They were fairly low costs. They were built rather quickly. And one of the things that I think a lot of folks can relate to here in the United States is that they were projects that didn't have an existing organization or didn't have an existing capital program, right? There was no metro in Copenhagen prior to this project, and Madrid had a metro system, but it was not very extensive. And so the first series of questions I want to get into is how do you take a region that doesn't have a lot of experience building a metro system, a complex politically, complex technically, complex operationally, this system from the ground up, and develop it in a way that is not only quick and effective, but also at pretty competitive prices. And so I want to start with you, Anne Greth. You talked about, you worked at the construction company, which was the Orestad Development Corporation first, right, which helped develop land and build the metro system, and then morphed into the Copenhagen Metro as it is today. Can you talk about how that whole organization was set up from the start, and why the Copenhagen or the Denmark government decided to go that route of a kind of that construction company route rather than using an existing institution?
Yes, at the time, which was in the beginning of the 1990s, Copenhagen and also Denmark had a very bad economical situation. So there was no money to pay for infrastructure projects, and at the same time, it was very important to try to improve the economical situation, improve the activity in the society. And therefore the idea, right, that we could actually, by having an area owned by the state and the municipality of Copenhagen, we could use that by building a new infrastructure, metro, and thereby giving the land around the metro a higher value. We could use that higher value to actually pay for the metro, and thereby avoid using the taxpayer money we didn't have at that time. And that actually showed up to work. We took up loans from private loans, and we paid back the loans from the income from selling the land after having established the metro. And at the same time, we actually decided to try to set up a metro system which was so efficient that we could have a surplus from the operation, which could also be used for a part of the paying a part of the cost of the construction of the metro. And we get the same amount of money for the passengers, and it is not high, it's not a high fee they pay. And we get the same as other companies, the regional trains, the buses, but we have made the metro that efficient that we can have a surplus, which the other companies are not able to. And this surplus we also use to pay for the metro infrastructure. So look upon it in common, we actually got some very important high class public transport. We got it financed without using the public money, and at the same time we actually got an improvement in the development of Copenhagen, not only the new areas but also actually in the old part of the city, because the metro is not only serving the new area, it's also serving the center of Copenhagen, and thereby giving the center a higher quality, and actually becoming, the metro has become one of the most important development activities in Copenhagen, making Copenhagen change from you could say maybe a little bit a sleepy old town to now becoming a modern but also historic city, and that is actually due to the metro. And I have to mention also, it is due to the high class. It's not only the trains running, but also the high class architecture, which Nille actually contributed to.
We definitely want to get into the station design, and we'll do that in a minute. But I want to pivot to Dionisio too, right? Madrid had not done a whole lot of construction, and then all of a sudden had this tremendous boom in construction. How did the region pull that off? Both, with the creation of an organization called Mintra, which managed some of the later phases of the work. But how do you create an institution that can do that and hire the staff that can manage these mega projects on short notice?
Yeah, indeed, the creation of Mintra was one of the solutions. Yeah? They were an independent body of the regional government, so they had much more agile mechanisms for everything that has to do with administrative procedures, in order to tender, in order to recruit also the best experts from the different companies in Spain and all around the world. But in addition to Mintra, I would say that in Madrid, the key for success was the existence of a strong public transport authority with a big number of mature projects that have been planned during many years, and also, of course, an excellent public transport operator, which is Metro de Madrid, with more than 100 years now of service. And this combination was the key for success. Yeah? I would say that additionally to this, and we'll come back to that maybe later, the key for success in Madrid extension plan has been the political leadership and the strong governance. Yeah? From the very beginning, this has been, let's say, I would say, the cornerstone of the extension plans.
Got it. And so, on this note of, and I want to get to that political leadership and political acceptance in a moment, but while we're talking about the staffing, right? This is something that we have a struggle with here in the United States, I think, is, how do we attract top level staff to the public agency? And then also, how do we balance that with consultants, right? And this is where I think I'm going to go back to you and Annegret to talk a little bit about how you attracted the top level staff. And then I want to ask you, Neil, in your experience at Arup and other consulting agencies, I mean, how do we balance working with consultants that bring necessarily knowledge and also making sure that there's a really strong leadership on the public sector side? So let's start with Annegret to give a little bit of perspective on how we attract those staff to public agencies.
Yes. First of all, I think it's important to be aware that this company was set up as a public-owned but private working managed company, which meant that even if the politician was backing up very much, there were arm's length between the politician and us, and which gave us a freedom to actually manage in the way we found the most efficient to be a construction. Actually also an operation company later on, but that's another story. And what I actually always say is, it's more important, it's not important to have the best player. The most important is to have the best team. And that was actually what we focused on, to get the best team covering all the skills we needed, all the competencies we needed. And there we actually went, not only in Denmark, we went all over the world to attract specialists and people with a high knowledge. We also actually emphasized that the people we employed were people who were both coming from the theoretical part, from theoretical knowledge, but also from the practical area. Our technical director came from the contractor side, and that was actually very good also. And then we were actually focusing more on having a small and dedicated, highly qualified group of staff internally, and then having a lot of people. So we were actually a very small group, and we hired consultancies, and it was important to understand that consultancies were really great in technical and specialist items, and they were very skilled, and we could use the best we could get from the all over the world. But at the same time, it is important that consultancies, in our experience, has difficulties to make decisions. So it was very important that we had an internal strong management, which actually were able to make decisions and also take responsibility, and also in the way that we took all the blames on us, not blaming the consultants, not blaming the technicians, not blaming the politicians. I think that was actually a part of our setup. We took responsibility.
That's great. But I want to get Neil's perspective on this, right? And as someone who's worked as a consultant and as a designer, what is the right balance between that public sector leadership and the role of the private sector in helping these projects move forward? And what regions do you think do it well, and where have we struggled?
I think it's all, I think Anna Great is saying it's not about the single players, it's about that team, the team that is, the team who is actually going to live with it, because consultant comes in, they do the project and they leave. And so you also have a team that has to, stay with the project for the rest of their life or whenever. So it's that right mix at the time. I think the most success we have had as consultant is when we actually meet a team who is not big, but very qualified, and who also have a vision. And I think that's the strong thing about Copenhagen. There was a very, very clear vision. What is it we want? It was also very clear that they didn't want a heavy train that should take all the passengers in the world and move them around in Copenhagen. It was a smart system. So it was actually the system of the system. So it was about looking at all the system in public transport and how do you connect that? So you could say that the system in Copenhagen is small trains, fast headways and all these things. But if you go to a city who's, 3 times bigger as Copenhagen, you could probably do the same by having, the same thing, but, sort of more circles that actually interfere with each other. So it's all about that thing about having that vision from the client side. And then we as consultants can help them. But also, I think Anna Greater, many years ago said to me, please ask all the stupid questions. So we ask the question, why? And you realize there's so many rules and regulations, there's so many things that when you ask why, people say, that's how we do it here. And it's very problematic to change that. And I can just say, that's what I hear all over the world, and it's the same problems, right? So ticketing, we design things where we still believe that you will have a ticket. You will not have a ticket, it will be on your phone or your glasses, on the chip in your ear, or whatever it is, but you will not have a physical ticket. There will not be the barriers. So all these things will go, but it takes a long time for some organizations to actually see these things. And that's what I mean with an agile organization, is that mix of an agile, very professional organization who knows what they want and what they don't want, and the consultancy who can help them, with their international experience, their local experience, and, the technical stuff that, of course, a client cannot have because, they're not, that's not what their game. So if that combination, I think, is where, if that is fruitful, then you really got fantastic systems up and running.
Very good. I'm intrigued by the rules and regulations issue. That came up an awful lot in our work, not just for station design, right? And I'd like to talk a little bit about what some of the rules and regulations are for stations designs, given that stations are so expensive. But I also like to talk a little bit about the rules and regulations for letting a project go forward, right? And this is a challenge that we have a lot in the United States, where a public agency will want to, they need to dig up a street, or they need to move utilities, and then they have to go through a whole bunch of permitting at local jurisdictions to make that happen, and it turns into a very complicated and convoluted process. And so let's start with that, and then I want to move over to the station design rules. And I'm going to go to you, Dionisio, about how did the organizations that were building the metro in Madrid, how do they overcome getting those local permits to move a project forward? What were the barriers there, and what were some of the lessons learned in terms of getting a project done and moving it forward?
Yes, I think again the role of the Public Transport Authority was strategic in relation to this. Yeah, to give you an overview, the board of this Public Transport Authority is composed by 20 people, yeah? Representatives from the national government, from the regional government, from the different local governments, from the operators, from the trade unions, from the consumers associations, even. Yeah, so as you can imagine, it's not easy to reach a consensus on the different topics and the different projects within the plans that have been approved every 4 years. But it's also true that once this consensus is reached, projects are very clear and everything kind of flows. Yeah. As you mentioned, this type of investments, they do require a lot of permits, from land acquisition to environmental approvals, electrical substations. I would say that the key here has been, together with this coordination from the Public Transport Authority, the kind of anticipation and planning. Yeah, for instance, giving you an example from the environmental permits, in many occasions when the projects were even at the viability study, the environmental reports, they were not only focusing on, let's say, the best preferred alternative, but in the same corridor, 2 or 3 alternatives were being studied in parallel, and the 3 environmental permits were processed just in case. Yeah, so all this together with a strong project management and decisions by a small team, as colleagues were mentioning before, in less than 24 hours by the responsibles, has been key. Of course, I mean, many local governments. Yeah, I mentioned that the metro now reaches 12 municipalities. Yeah, so local governments, of course, they tried to take advantage of the constructions. They were asking for new parks, for new pipes, for new parkings, for new schools. But it's also true that the deadline was common, because local elections and regional elections are at the same time here in Spain, and they all wanted to kind of cut the ribbon before the elections. So this, let's say, more strategic alignment from the Public Transport Authority point of view, together with this very professional project management and a common political interests, helps a lot.
Very good. Anna Greta, I see you smiling. Did you have similar experience in constructing the Copenhagen Metro?
Yes, some of them, but I think that we had a benefit of that. We start by preparing the environmental investigations and all that, and a discussion with the public and the local governments and so on. And all that is actually finished before the law passed the parliament, which actually means that you have made all the decisions, and therefore you don't need to have all the discussion during the construction phase. And that also means that, for example, the relocation of utilities, archaeological investigation, land acquirement and acquisition, and that sort of issue, it is actually solved before we start the construction. And the part, for example, the safety approval, that is included in the time schedule. So we know that it will take some time, we'll put it in. So that has never given reason for delay. So it is actually seen from our side, it's very important that you clarify before that you start the construction as much as possible. And what you can't clarify, you put into the time schedule, and then establish a very good cooperation with the authorities, which we actually were so lucky that we could do, so that we went through the processes without any problem. So was a problem. You mentioned it in the report about the noise, but that was something, it was due to the change of ruling, but not due to, and that we couldn't have foreseen before, but all what we can foresee, we took into consideration before we started.
Right. Bringing up topics of community engagement too, which we're going to get into. But before we do that, I want to I got a question for Neil about, again, the rules and regulations, and specifically as it pertains to station design. Stations are often one of the most expensive parts of building a subway system or even a light rail system. What rules and regulations are most common in terms of posing challenges to keeping stations streamlined and low cost, and what seems to work well, and where in the world have you seen regulations that are perhaps unnecessary or adding undue costs and complexities to how we build stations?
Yeah, I think we once made a model so we could actually find out where did the money go in a station. I think the biggest problem is that we have, as an organization, you would like to have a new metro station, or you would like to have a whole new line. You travel around in the world and you see things and think, I want that. And I want that with the amount of square meters per passenger on the platform. And even though that the service level, what is the service level actually? Because if you want to have a service level like they have in some stations in Asia, where they just have, the capacity of building very large platforms, and yes, they will fill up, after a couple of years. But if you take that and bring it to Europe or to the US, that is just too many square meters, and that means, yes, stations will be packed for around 30 seconds every hour in the morning, for 3 hours or whatever. But it's that service level. What is the right service level? And if you start looking at that, that's one thing where you can really bring down the width of the platform, because if it's an underground station, that's where the money is. Also the whole ventilation, and that's where we have, fire, ventilation for passengers, ventilation for the train, all these things, in the old days, you were calculating by hand. Now we have, computer programs. We can actually really go in to see what is happening with the different kinds, with smoke, with fire, with, ventilation of things. So we can actually optimize that. But that means that maybe we have to break some of the rules that is, or requirements that, we change them because things are actually moving on. And if you have an organization as a client who is ready to do that, and a municipality, and where you can actually have that debate, very open debate, that if we calculate this way and we can prove it with a CFD calculations, all these things, then it will be different. So for Copenhagen, we have daylight on the platforms, but these daylights are not just for the fun of having daylight. It's actually also ventilation, smoke ventilation. So there's this double thing in it, right? But you have to do your calculation. So I think it's looking at all these rules that, what is applicable in Asia and what is applicable in Bielefeld in Germany, or in Berlin, where I am right now. It's completely two different worlds, right? And that means that we have service levels, in Europe, and we have service levels in the US, and they are different. But it's being open to the rule book, and actually saying where is the rules actually silly? What is that? There's something about how many locks should there be coming from any light source. But it's not about what comes out of the light source. It's about the reflection on the material. So there's a lot more about, what is the material, what is the reflection of the material, and how do we work with all these things. So I think there's a lot of things when you start asking why, and you have that qualified discussion between consultants and clients and contractors to find that thing that everybody can agree on, and the municipality. Then there is an openness to change these rules that sometimes are very odd, especially fire rules. You know, depends on very much on culture, and sometimes organizations are open for that debate. Other times they're not, and that's why, you know, sometimes it's actually very expensive to do the same station in Copenhagen, and if you do that station somewhere else, just due to the rules of the game.
Well, and so that brings up another question. I want to follow up on that, because you mentioned both the need to revisit the rules, but also have a more innovative approach and innovative thinking on how we meet the rules that already exist, right? And almost all places in the US follow the National Fire Protection Association's Section 130 rules for ventilation and fire escapes. And you know, in the report, we recommend that we revisit those and see if we could change those. I mean, is that correct, right? Should we be revising the rules for that, or is it more just taking a more innovative and nuanced approach to meeting the rules that already exist?
I think, you know, so if you look at Copenhagen, that there's a fix there, escape there, who's, you know, enclosed pressured thing, so that's fulfill the NFPA. There is no extra fix there in case of escalators not working. And yes, sometimes there is an escalator not working, but we actually calculate that it will work completely, no problem. When I do anything in England, I need to have fixed stairs all over, because they don't believe that the escalator is actually working. So that means that that fixed stair is actually taking out width on the platform, making the platform wider. There's a lot of construction of getting a fixed stair down. So there's these things where the rule set is actually okay. It's also the interpretation of the rules that you can actually do stations without it. And yes, one escalator is very expensive if you look at it as one escalator, but it's the holistic view of the station. And that's where you say we don't need fixed stairs, because to be honest, no modern person is going to take a staircase more than 6 meters. The lift on 6 meters, that's the maximum you will do as a human being today. And no one is going to, from -20 on a platform up to concourse level on a fixed stairs. It's not going to happen. I mean, they will wait for the lift or whatever. So there's these things where behavioral have changed, and we don't need these things because we can still, inside the rules of NFPA, do without fixed stairs. So that's just an example.
That's great. So I want, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We might give another example from Copenhagen. We actually were, according to the ruling, we should have had 19 shafts, and that the shafts are half the station or something like that. They're rather big. And by using the industrial norms, we were allowed to, Senelec norms, then we were, which is a risk-based process, then we were able to show that we could actually, it was enough with 3 shops instead of 19. We could live up to have the same risk level or better than with the normal ruling, by actually using materials and special materials and so forth. So actually, we not only we saved a lot of costs, but we also saved a lot of people from huge sites in the middle of Copenhagen.
It's really interesting. Okay, so I want to, we've got about 20 minutes or so left in our conversation. I want to make sure that we get to a couple other things, and one of them that comes up a lot is community input, engaging with stakeholders at the local level, getting their feedback, and how do we balance that, right? And I think an issue that we've uncovered here in the United States is that we put a high premium on making everyone happy, right? And so there are lots of betterments and there's lots of concessions that projects make to communities to help improve them along the way. And some of those are good, and some of them add a tremendous amount of cost, both in making construction very complicated and then also making the project very, very large. But also community engagement is really important, right? And it's and there are some really important things that come out of those discussions. And so I want to start with you, Dionisio, and then go to Anna-Greth to talk about how you engage with the community in your respective regions. What is that balance like? Does it work well, and what does it mean for the ultimate project? So yeah, Dionisio, if you could just talk a little bit about how community engagement works in Madrid, and what seems to be working well and what's more problematic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I would say that in Madrid, we had followed the standard public info and standard public participation processes that are regulated by the European Union. Yeah? Again, if you have to put into services more than 50 kilometers in 4 years, as the colleagues were mentioning, you have to plan and to have everything kind of settled in advance. Yeah? And the very good thing here in Madrid is that the people, they do want it, the metro. Yeah? There was a lot of support by society. There was a lot of support by the media. Of course, on street impact was minimized and coordinated with the different municipalities, with the different departments of the city, taking advantage of summer holiday periods, for instance, to intensify those works during the summer. Yeah. Of course, it's completely different constructing underground in comparison with light rail. Yeah. For instance, in the last period here, there were 36 kilometers of light rail where everybody can see the daily execution of the works, and of course the impact, the perception, let's say, of impact is much bigger. Yeah? So in these particular cases, in these 4 light rail lines, there was a special communication campaign addressed to shop owners, to schools, in coordination with the different municipalities. Yeah? But I tend to think here that we need to find a balance. Yeah? How many projects, even the smaller ones, we know that had never-ending discussions leading to 2-3 years delay, even even in small projects. Yeah? My point of view, but this could be is of course my personal point of view, is that citizens, they do also have the opportunity to express their opinion in the next elections. Yeah. And here in Madrid, the results were super clear in favor of the achievements, despite all the, let's say, disturbances and hassles during the construction.
Very good. Anna-Greth.
Yeah, we actually involve the people both in general, but also the people, the neighbors for to the metro. But we do it during the environmental impact assessment, and we do it by preparing the law and the alignment and the location of the station. And it's not only us, but also politicians listening to what is said. We actually moved a couple of stations, changed the location, not much, but due to what people actually wanted. And then the law is passed the parliament, and then you can't discuss where the alignment, you can't discuss the station because that is something the parliament has decided upon. But then we actually afterwards, we involve people around the station in how should the surroundings of the station be. And there we actually have what we call open design workshops. That was very good because that was easier for people to contribute to. And I think that actually was a very positive experience we had about that.
That's great. And so, Neil, I want you to jump in because stations are often one of those things where there's the most community feelings and input and ideas on how to change them. So how do you balance desires to change the stations in some way with the reality of budgets and costs associated with doing those?
I think Anna-Greth is right, and also Dionisio, that if you have the basic right, we know where the station is, We know, that it's either deep station or is it a light rail, whatever it is. That is a given. Then you start connecting with the community. And that means if it's a station that have any kind of a coffee shop or newsstand or whatever, could that, instead of being, 7-Eleven or some kind of chain, could that be run locally? Could that actually have a face outside? So it's not, so everything, the amenities to the station is not for the station, but it's actually for the community. What is it that could bring the community to have a positive view on this? Because of course, a lot of people is actually saying, oh, there'll be a lot of noise. But also, if you look at where I lived in Copenhagen, I moved when, before it was finished, because the project takes 10 years, right? So the one who's actually there in the beginning is not the one who gets the benefits at the end, maybe. And that means that you also have a constant new flow of people in your community. And that's why you have to connect with that community. So you actually feel, okay, we can do that for you. We can actually change the plaza here. If you like to have more skateboard ramps or whatever, or you like to have cafes or bar, we can do that. But what we also, I think, learned in Arab over the years is that we have something we call the fast, the medium, and the slow. So these projects takes a long time. So what is it that we can do today? What is it that we can we put pop-up shops immediately, when they start putting the fences up for the work sites? What is the medium things? Is that a way of engaging with the community on different kind of social platforms? And then we have the slow one that is actually changing the pavement, or making it good for bicycles or e-cars or whatever happens. In 10 years is a long time. It's almost like we just had an iPhone a little bit more than 10 years, right? But most of us haven't had an iPhone for more than 10 years, and we think we have it all their life. So that's, the technology is moving really fast forward. So that means there's something that takes a longer time to realize. And I think where we have had success is actually when we have done these very fast things. So you can see something is happening in front of you. We put benches up. We're trying to make it sort of kind of a nice thing, even though it's big machines behind it digging. And then I think it's also working with the municipality. And I think in Copenhagen, I was surprised when we did City Ring and that the city used it to test things. So they closed streets. They said, oh, you can put your building site here because then we can close the street and then we can test what happens with traffic. So maybe when we are finished, we will reopen the street, or we will actually make it a street which is for bicycles and pedestrians or whatever. So I think there's also this, that while you're doing these changes in the urban fabric, you can use them politically and smart. You can test things out, and then you can of course blame it on an grader and the train company, that they are the ones who did it. But it's actually for the benefits of all of us. So I think there is this engagement that we try to do as early in the project as possible, but it's not about that everybody can come down and say, I would like to have a round station or a triangle or whatever. No, there is something that is given, and there's something that we can talk about, because if you cannot explain the complexity of a station to normal people, that will not be fair. And so it's what is it they can actually really have a go on. And I think we did that. We were doing cardboard models with them. We were listening and really saying, we don't want that. We rather have that. We don't want a fountain of water. We rather have benches in the sun and all these things. So I think it can happen, but you have to engage in it, and you have to also be ready to change some of the things you thought was really fantastic that people just don't like when it comes to it.
That's really interesting. I really like that. And I think that points to a point that Dionisio brought up earlier, which is the kind of that political support, right? That underpins all of this. And one of the things that we found in the Madrid case in particular in our research was that the huge build out of subway systems was supported and actually competed on by socialist and conservative governments, kind of outbidding each other on out promising how much they could build. And so I want to talk about that a little bit too, because that having that really widespread political agreement that building a subway is a good thing is crucial, I think, to moving this forward. How did, and again, I'll start with you, Dionisio. How did we build that broad political agreement that constructing subways was important in Madrid, and how could we potentially replicate that in a place like the US?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, in Madrid, it was as you said, we were very lucky because we had the political leadership that really make the difference. She considered public transport as a kind of let's say social benefit for the population, and they do understand the benefits in terms of growth, employment, competitiveness, but also social inclusion, equity, etc. So Madrid was in the middle of an urban sprawl process, with more and more people moving to the metropolitan areas, and they did bet on public transport as let's say the backbone, yeah? To mobilize that. Yeah? It's also very important to notice that in the case of local and regional elections, kind of the ideology plays a less important role in comparison to national elections. Yeah? In the local elections, you are closer to the citizens. You need to solve their problems, and I think it's worthy to mention this anecdote you referred to before. Yeah, in Madrid, in the period 1995 to 1999, the Conservative Party promised to build 50 kilometers of new metro line, and they did. Yeah, the Socialist Party. In the opposition by that time, they say, no, look, it's impossible, you won't succeed. But when in 1999 the Popular Party has delivered 56 kilometers of new metro line, they say, okay, you took advantage of all the studies we have done in the past, all the environmental permits we managed to have, all the mature projects we did, you will not succeed again. Yeah? So in the period 1999-2003, the Conservative Party again said, look, we will build 60 kilometers of metro. Yeah? And the Socialist Party, they say, no, this time you won't be able to do that. And they play against, let's say, this culture of construction of new metro lines. But they did again, and they won elections again, and the Conservative Party was getting more and more municipalities all around the region. So when in 2003, the Popular Party said, look, we will be constructing 90 kilometers of metro, the Socialist Party came saying, we will construct 110 kilometers of metro. Yeah? So they really changed completely their mind, and they noticed that it has a lot of political credit in the long term. Yeah.
That's great. That's a really fun story. And I'm looking at the time here. We have just a few minutes left, and so I want to go around to the three of you. And we know that there's a challenge in the U.S. with building projects. We're facing high costs, long timelines, and also an urgency to build. Right. Not only is there potential for new money, but with the economic and social and climate challenges in front of us, it's imperative that we build out good transit. And so, given your experience and backgrounds, what are some things that you might recommend to folks in the U.S., people that are listening into this at transit agencies or at different levels of government or in the private sector? What are some recommendations that you would provide, kind of your top level things when taking on a big challenge like building a transit line? And so we'll start you with Anna-Greta and then go to you, Neil, and then finally we'll close with you, Dionisio. Just again, those top level, top recommendations as to how we can crack the nut over here.
Yes, I would say that my first recommendation would be use the time upfront. Try to get as many decisions made so that when you start construction, you know what you are going to construct. And of course, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be visions, and it should be all that should of course be is important, but try to get the visions, you could say, implemented in a way where you can manage it after you start construction, and try to get all the site activities as relocation, utilities, and so on done before you start the construction. I think that is very important. And for the issues you can't solve upfront, then put them into the time schedule so they don't become surprises. And the other recommendation is that don't change anything during the construction, even if you find that the door is sitting in the roof. Don't change it. Go on and get it done, and then you can change it afterwards, because any delay in the construction period costs a lot of money. And then I think the third issue is actually to mention that try to have an entity responsible, which are skilled, which has its own competences, but also its own responsibility, and be ready to take this responsibility also when you are blamed for something you're not responsible for. Take that responsibility, because that can save a lot of political discussions and delays due to political issues. Very shortly.
Very good. That's great. Neil.
Yeah, I think, get the system right. And by that, get the complete system, of different kind of mobility. So it's not about, just doing a metro. It's actually being a mobility provider. So different kind of mobility has to be linked together. I think that is very important. And then when you do that, look at the city and find out, where do you want change? Is that a deprived area where you want change? Is there areas that needs more demand? And when you sort of put them with small needles, that's where your alignment goes. Your alignment should not be controlled by technical things or whatever. It's actually about, getting the stations right so you have the right passengers. And then you can decide whether you want to have a light rail or a mini metro or a larger metro or whatever, but, get that done. And then I think it's about, remember that this is for people, this is for passengers. This is not for us as technicians or designers or whatever. We are actually doing this to provide people with the best means of transport wherever they want to go, and to use the city in a completely new way, and for everyone. I mean, everyone, no matter of income or whatever, everybody should be able to do that. And that is to talk about the narrative. And if you see in Copenhagen, I have met the prime minister in the train. I've met, all kinds of people, that you normally would not think will take the train, but they do, because it is the fastest way of getting around.
That's great. Dionisio, last words.
Yeah, I fully agree with the colleagues. I mean, technical solutions are there. Technology is almost ready for everything. Yeah, I will. Yeah, found my, let's say, 3 kind of prerequisites on the following. First, again, the political leadership, understanding the socioeconomic benefits of the projects, not only for the city but for the whole country in many respects. This is fundamental. And we have seen so many good projects, so many good strategies failing, because even if they have the right institutional framework, they have the proper funding model, etc., due to the lack of this capital. Yeah? Second thing I would say is to secure funds for the overall project. You can't be struggling with funding in the middle of the plan. Yeah? And this is there are many examples in different countries all around the world where they are building the metro by stretches, starting not for the best, let's say, part of the network, but for the part of the network where they will disturb less the citizens and it's a complete, from my point of view, it's a complete mistake. It should be a comprehensive plan making sense for the development of the city, as Neil was mentioning. And the third one is and this I tend to agree also with Ingrid, establish very clear responsibilities and project management, anticipate problems, develop very detailed geological studies and in-depth studies, pre-work on the environmental permits, everything that has to do with service and utilities management, but do manage the project with a strong team with the right technical skills. I mean, take your responsibility. It's those projects can really transform the city, and I think this would be my 3 recommendations. Thank you.
All right. So of course we are running out of time, and so we're going to end the conversation. I feel like we could continue this all day if you all had infinite time, right? We could certainly talk about this for a while, but we do have to end. I will note that for those listening in, if you have any questions or want to expand on anything, send us here at Eno a note, and we can connect you with the right person, either one of these 3 distinguished guests here on our panel, or others that we've talked to as part of this work. There's just so much we can be learning from folks outside of the US, and we really want to thank the panel for taking the time today, and for sharing your honest thoughts and insights, and we hope to continue to engage with you in the future. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.